Today, we're joined by one of our NewmR sponsors, Netquest, and they'll be taking most of the spotlight in this particular webinar. So I'm here today to chair the session, and in terms of the running order, we will have a short presentation from Raúl Gordo from Omnicom, and then we'll have a discussion which is moderated by Joaquim from Netquest. He'll be joined by Raúl again, and then Ioana from Netquest and Ray Poynter from NewmR. After the presentation discussion, there'll be lots of time for questions and answers. So I'd now like to introduce Raúl, who'll be taking us through the presentation on how you can use digital behavior data to improve your tracking studies. So welcome, Raúl, and over to you.
Thank you, Sue. Yes, in this presentation, we are going to see how we improve our tracking studies by including the digital behavior analysis to reinforce the traditional research. This particular case is about the toy market. The toy market is an industry that shows a very high seasonality, since 50% of the annual sales take place in just 1 month, and companies concentrate the most of their marketing activities in the last quarter of the year. We have an extensive history of consumer research in this category. In the past, we have conducted tracking studies, focus group, ethnographics interviews, and we have set up communities in digital platforms to talk to consumers. But we always have the feeling that we were missing some important information, especially when it comes to the role of the internet in the purchase process. So with that in mind, we decided to redesign our tracking studies to make sure that we have all the information needed to make a complete analysis of the purchase of toys during Christmas. To set up a project like this, we faced several challenges. First, because both the toys category and retail channels in general are undergoing a deep transformation. For example, Black Friday was widely implemented in Spain in 2015. Then with the growing use of the internet, we can expect respondents to remember all their online activity in detail and to be able to list all the sites that they have visited when we send them a questionnaire. We need a more accurate way to measure the digital consumption. A great proportion of the online traffic is moving to mobile devices, and the toys category is not an exception. So we need to have information from desktop and mobile activity as well. And then we also need to avoid the social desirability bias, because in previous surveys, we realized that some consumers and parents are reluctant to say that they buy toys for the kids in some low-price websites. Then to fulfill our objectives and tackle these challenges, we created a system to monitor consumer behavior during the pre-Christmas and Christmas period. We combined the survey approach with the online behavior tracking, and both methodologies were applied to the same sample of respondents. The survey will give us information about preferences, options, attitudes, and offline behaviors of the consumers, while the behavioral tracking will provide the accuracy we need in the measurement of the digital activity. Well, Netquest in the Q&A section can give you more technical details about this, but in summary, what we did was to work with 458 families that collaborate with us for 3 months, filling a questionnaire every 2 weeks. And then the behavioral tracking collected the whole navigation of the same group of families during that 3-month period. Again, Netquest can give you the technical detail, but in a nutshell, the data collection is done through the installation of a browser plugin on desktop and an app on mobile devices. Some results, well, the specific results are not very relevant in this presentation unless you work in the toy sector, but what we want to do is to show you that we get results at 3 levels. First, the questionnaire we designed for the survey gave us the basic information about how families face Christmas. We learn about how much they are planning to spend, how parents intervene in the gift list, that technology is the most desired gift for boys and girls. We learned about the drives and barriers of e-commerce, and we also understood the different roles of the media for parents and for the children. This is the basic information that the company needs to know. But then it was creating a community of families and working together with them for 3 months that really gave us the possibility to understand much better how they live that period of the year, providing us with a continuous flow of information so the brand can react to any change in the market. For example, you can see there that parents start the season with a budget in mind of 162 euros, but we saw how this spending forecast was growing as the weeks went by. And at the end of the period, they end up spending 45% more than initially planned. Then the visits to the different retailers changed during the process. You have an example there of the hypermarkets. They benefit from promotional periods, but then they decrease in favor of specialized toy stores when we get close to Christmas Eve. The use of the different touch points also evolves. In the study, we have 15 points of contact. There you have some of them. You can see the two most important ones, TV and store catalogs, and you can see how they behave differently. And there's even a point when they switch positions. The continuous survey also allows us to define the different stages of the requesting process. Then we can understand when the demand is triggered, when parents start to buy, or when the majority of the children have already made a decision. And then we can plan the advertising campaigns accordingly. And all of this information is thanks to the continuous survey. But it was really the combination of the two methodologies, the digital ethnography and the continuous survey, that gave us a unique knowledge of the consumer behavior and a much better understanding of the market. For example, now we know that Spanish families visit 142 websites related to the category, but they are only aware of having been in 24 of them. This already gives us some clues about the relevance of the different sites and what should be the presence of our brands in them. We have access also to their queries in Google, so we can read what they're writing about toys, if they are looking for instructions, recommended age groups, other parents' opinions, prices, or where to buy. It's a very detailed information, but when you analyze it and group it, you can see that searching for a retailer, the orange line in the chart, is a much more common activity than looking for a particular toy. Once the consumer is in the retailer site, they will use the internal search bar to find the toy they want. This is very relevant information from trade marketing department and also for search optimization. Where the digital tracker will learn that 7 out of 10 families browse toy sites at some point during that 3 months period, being Toys R Us the most popular one, followed by Amazon. That peak that you can see there in the middle of the chart reflects the increase in traffic during Black Friday. When we analyze the details of their browsing activity and then we group it by type of site, we can represent the different steps of the purchase journey and the migration between sites during that process, and then start to identify some patterns. In the first step, we can see that the activity starts almost always in search engine, that big green bar on the left. Then a great proportion of consumers go to retailer sites in the second step, the brown bar, the chart, and many of them remain in the same site, navigating through the different sections throughout the process. Some leave to refine their search on Google and then come back to the retailers, and others give a more social approach to their search. They look for information and opinion in social networks, the orange part in the chart, and little by little these platforms are taking them to search engines and to online stores. This is probably the most complex and difficult to analyze information that you get with this type of studies. So it can be useful to synthesize this information of all those steps of the purchase process. And we can visualize the importance of each type of site, the site represented by the size of the bubble there, and the interaction between sites, represented by the arrows. As we have seen, search engines are the main entry point in the category, and these search engines redirect consumers to the retailers and the e-commerce website. Many of them go back to refine their searches. We can see the number of people that go to social networks, and then we could deepen more and more to describe all the digital behavior of our consumers in detail and draw different maps like this one for different segments of consumers based on their answers to their questionnaire, their opinions, behaviors, or demographic profiles. As a conclusion, I can tell you that this information has been key to understand the process through what kids decide what they want, as well as their parents' purchase behavior, and the results of the project are used extensively throughout the company. The marketing team has a deeper knowledge of our consumers. The trade department benefits from a better understanding of the role of the e-commerce, and we have been able to optimize the advertising investment by adapting the campaign to the real consumer's behavior.
Thank you very much, Raúl, for that. And it's now time to bring in the broader discussion panel to talk about what we've just been listening to. So, Joaquim, I'll hand over to you to moderate the discussion and introduce your fellow panelists.
Thank you, Sue. We're very happy to have here today with us Raúl. Thanks for coming to our office in Barcelona. Ray, thanks for being here with us as well. And we're very happy to start with our collaboration with you with such a webinar. So here with us, Raúl, Ray, and my colleague Ioana, as responsible for operations at Europe and APAC here in Barcelona from Netquest. And as Netquest, we are delighted to host this webinar. For those of you that do not know Netquest, Netquest is a digital partner for online data. For the last 5 years, we have invested much energy in understanding digital behavior of our consumers, our panelists. So that's why we acquired in 2014 Wakupa, the Dutch company that has provided us the technology to track people, what they do online and mobile. And well, we have just seen one of the examples of the things that we can deliver with this combination of behavioral and survey data. This paper was presented at the latest ESOMAR Congress in Berlin last September. So those of you that are members of ESOMAR, you can find the paper as well as the video recording on the ANA website. So this is the repository of ESOMAR. So being this said, thank you, Raúl, for this presentation. I think it's a very rich one. You have touched many things. I mean, you have talked about the profile of consumers. You have talked about what people were expecting to spend and what they finally did and what kids were doing and so on. And one of the things that always, maybe because of my retail past, what I love is the purchase journey, which is one of the richest parts. So my question would be, what was Hasbro's original demand? Can you share what was the maturation process from the original demand that they had to the final proposal that you did and you delivered in the end?
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, it has been quite a long process because the original request is from a few years ago. They asked us to help them understanding how the demand is created among kids and how is the parents' purchase journey. And to answer that, we have been conducted tracking studies with telephone interviews for a few years. And although they have provided us with very interesting and very useful results, we always have this feeling that we were missing something, especially in the last year. We knew from other sources that visits to the toy sites were increasing and the importance of e-commerce was growing. And it seems that having just a few questions in a telephone questionnaire was not enough to reflect this change in the market. So we started to think about how to improve that. We considered several options, like including a qualitative section in the study, by gathering information, tagging our online campaigns. All these options has pros and cons. And then I was aware of this possibility, of this methodology, and for me it was the right option, basically because it's panel-based. So first I can be sure of the profile of the people that we are talking to or gathering information of digital activity, but also because we can interview the same people. We don't have to look for lookalike audiences in other sources. We can talk to the same families and we can really cross their online and offline activity. And once I presented this option, everybody agreed that it was the right tool. We just have to make some changes to my initial design to meet the budget, but everything started quickly.
Oh, it seems easy, apart from the years that you had to convince them.
Yeah.
But finally, we did.
So, Raúl, one of the slides that caught my eye there, this is Ray speaking, was the difference between how many sites people visited and how many sites they thought they visited. Was this a surprise for your client?
Well, yes and no, because with the telephone interviews, we realized that people were not able to declare all the sites. We used to compare results with that question with the ComScore audience figures, and we realized that the top sites in ComScore were not mentioned in the questionnaire. So we also suspect that people were not able to. They were surprised by the high number of sites. Yeah. 142 seems a lot, because people look for very small sites, or people from other places look for shops that are not in their city and these kind of things.
Yeah, there are many remarkable aspects on this study. For instance, one is how much money they were expecting to spend and the amount of money that in the end they spent. Mm-hmm. And the other one is the journey. So how people go through the category and how they assess all the information. Let's move on to see how it was done, because Ioana, 463 families segmented by the age of their children, 11 weeks, so it is 3 months, fulfilling every 2 weeks a survey, so it was 6 surveys, both the parents and the children. So it's really a very demanding task that we were asking to the panelists. How did you manage to get their engagement?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. As we all like numbers, I think I will start with the numbers to see how we ended up with these 463 people and what was the start base. So we actually started with 1,100 people that we invited.
How many, sorry?
1,100.
1,100, okay.
Yes. So this is the number that was our initial base for the recruitment. We addressed these people, explained them the project, and we're trying to get their level of interest and their interest in the project. We ended up recruiting 640. So this was the base with which we started the first week. But of course, these 600 people, some of them lost interest on the long way, and we ended up with with the 463, which is actually the objective that we discussed with Raúl at the beginning. So our objective was 400, and I think we managed to do this. What is important to know, apart from the numbers, is the level of engagement, because this was the key of this project to become a success. And the level of engagement doesn't come project-based, comes years ahead. And this is actually what Netquest brings, because the level of engagement is something that you construct, that you build with panelists, and this is what the model of a retention panel can bring you.
So it is something that you cannot improvise. You cannot.
No, you cannot. And actually, this is exactly what we didn't do in this project. We didn't improvise. We made a plan. We thought of a plan B in case the plan A falls apart. And then we try to stick to the plan and fulfill all the regular tasks, because we are talking about operations. So the client has objectives, and they have an objective that they wanna fulfill. But in the operation, it's all about planning, making a calendar, and then following the steps.
Yeah, and actually, that was one of my biggest concerns when we started the project, because I was afraid of ending up the process with no sufficient sample size. This is very demanding, as you said, and I thought that probably people will leave the project in the middle of that, and this would be terrible for us, because if we miss Christmas, we don't have an opportunity to do the study again.
Because all this data was used to really create the campaign advertisement for that Christmas, isn't it? So they were modulating their campaigning.
Yeah, that's why we need these results every week, because this was shared with the media team, and they were adjusting and reallocating budget and moving some toys forward in the process, in the campaign, and others later in the campaign. Yeah, so it was used live.
Okay. So Plan B is still in the desk. No?
Yes, actually we didn't apply Plan B.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Ray, I mean, you have witnessed all this digitization of our societies from this methodologist point of view. Do you think that market research, per se, we as professionals, as industry, have we been good or fast enough in the adoption of this digitization of societies?
I think I would borrow Raúl's answer earlier of yes and no. So yes, from the earliest days that these digital tools became available, we saw presentations from an agency and a client who did a project, who added some tracking, who added some data mining to make the picture. But it hasn't become common. And I think we need to think about why it hasn't become common. I think sometimes from the agency's point of view, they don't recommend this to the good, safe client who is happy. They recommend it to a client who is thinking of leaving, or they recommend it to a client who is not a client yet. And there they try the new shiny ideas. But quite often, if I look globally at agencies, they're reluctant to really push new ideas to happy clients. And on the client side, there is an awareness that old-fashioned tracking is not very good, but they are comfortable with it. They know how to work with it. They know their compensation is linked to it. So it's the change that has been disappointing. The change has been slower than it could have been, because the innovation has been there, and this project shows the innovation really well. We just need more urgency across the industry.
Do you agree, Raúl, with this point of view?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think maybe the way that we present this innovation of this type of things the client maybe we have to think about that. And
what would be the main barriers that you could find from an agency and from you as observer that agencies might find to really grasp this? Because now the technology gives us many possibilities, and this is a very good one, for instance. Which are the barriers for them to not adapt?
For an agency?
For an agency, yeah.
Well, probably for an agency is what you have just mentioned, that technology gives us many options. So in an agency, that my colleagues can think that technology providers can give us this information, not a research company, not a panel-based company. We can gather information via cookies and tags, and that will be the same. And you have to convince them that it's not the same. It's a great added value that you know who you're talking to, and you can complement that information for their digital activity with the questionnaire you design. You have to convince them about that, because otherwise they'll go to technology providers, to just give them this type of information.
From your perspective, Ray, what would you now, if you had here an agency guy, would you were asked by the art and say, hey, come on, wake up? Why?
Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge, one of them, of course, is always budget. You've got a tracking study. The end client would like to reduce the price of the study, and you are suggesting an improvement, which is unlikely to reduce the price of the study. So that is a tension, but it's not the biggest tension. Time. If I sell you the same as I sold you last year, it's a quick conversation. I need the end client, and I need the media company and the advertisers all to think about what is it we really need if we're making a change. And probably the best thing now is for companies like your own to say, here is something we did. Does anybody else want to do a project just like this? We don't have to go through the planning stage. We don't have to go through the creation stage. We can if you want to, but actually probably more projects the same is a good way to move forward, rather than saying we can solve, as you were saying a moment ago, lots of things. We have to narrow it down and say it provides this solution, rather than it provides every solution or many solutions.
But Ray, my experience trying to sell this sort of services, it brings a totally different kind of solution. I mean, what you provide with this digital data is something that you cannot get from other methodologies. So for instance, Netquest, we have data from 2014 in Brazil, in Spain, and some other Latin countries, and in US since a couple of years ago. So we have recorded all these panelists' data, what they do online and mobile. So if you are analyzing, for instance, the toys campaign, you can go back to 2014 and compare the same sort of study that Raúl has shared. We can compare it year towards year. So, so the amount of information is gathered there. So it's not information that you will have to collect. It's already collected. So why is it so sometimes hard for people to realize the richness of these data sets?
People are working too hard to think. That is a problem right across industry. So people are looking at what is my problem today rather than what is my opportunity. So it's going to require a good push to get people to start saying, I need this. It's not enough for people to want it. They have to need it. They've got to feel like they are missing out. And we have one other challenge, of course, which is always the problem for any supplier. We go to a client and we say, we have a better solution. And they say, do you mean the old one was no good? Oh, no, the old one was great. This is better. So is it different? Well, no, it's not different, but it's more. And that conversation, we probably need to be braver and say, yeah, it is better. And when this technology was not possible, it was as good as it could be, but there is a complete chasm difference. This is like the bicycle and the motor car. Is the motor car better? Sure, it's better. You get there dry, you don't cycle so hard, you can do more things, you can carry the shopping. We probably just need to be braver about saying the things we used to sell aren't good enough now.
And my opinion, like from any other type of methodology or research, what we have to do is to be able to link this methodology to the results of the client. Because if we go presented this like a new way of doing things, a more modern way of doing things, a technological advance, you will find some people that will buy just for that. But if you are able to prove them that knowing every day if people are visiting these sites for this e-commerce and which section, or how they react to an advertising campaign and go visit the competitor site and then go to Amazon and then purchase, if you give them information and you explain them how you are going to adapt the campaign to that and how results are going to change because of that. That's when they buy.
You can activate all these strategies.
So, Sue, I think you have some questions.
I actually have many questions.
Wow, that's good.
It is. We might start with one that's probably a clarification. And somebody's just asking, is it the same respondents of the survey who have digital cookies installed to track their behavior?
Not cookies. Maybe we should be clear with that. So please, Ioana.
I think this is a question for me. So thank you very much, Sue, for addressing this, and also to the person who asked this question. Yes, actually, it's exactly the same person, the same families that have been tracked in surveys for 3 months, and also offline. We were tracking their participation, their URLs, their participation in the websites. And I think actually was this the key of the entire project, that we don't change the participants from a week to another. We were tracking exactly the same people. We were looking at how they were acting, what was their behavioral on the websites that they were actually visiting, and what was their answers week after week for 3 months, for 11 weeks in the same survey. So this is very important to have it recorded like this.
So it's important to clarify that it's not based on cookies.
No.
It's a software that panelists download, an app, and also a plugin that we have on their apps. So it's person-centric. So it's not web-centric. It's device-centric in the sense that we record what people do on their PC, their desktop, and on their mobile. So it's not web-centric. It's consumer-centric.
Okay, I think that clarifies it. And Ioana, I think when you were talking about the amount of data you're collecting, that links quite nicely to the next question, where somebody says, regarding the behavioral tracking, how easy or difficult was the analysis of this? To what extent was it a manual?
Yeah, I think this one's for me. Yeah, I will like to say that it was very easy, but actually it was not. No, well, we try to make that easy, but imagine we have to report results to our colleagues, to the client and to the media agency every week for them to react to that. So we don't have plenty of time to analyze everything. So we had to be prepared for when we start receiving the results. More or less what we did, we try to be prepared in advance. We create whitelist with the terms that are really relevant for us, blacklist with the terms that have to be removed, categories and rules to classify sites in those categories, and try to automate this process as much as possible. Because when we start receiving the information, we receive about 700,000 records every week, and we have to work with that. So everything that can be automated really help us. But then we still have a very rich database. So we set up a digital platform to help us analyzing and visualizing this information. And we also had to be constantly checking the questionnaire. We didn't want to work only with behavioral data, so they are very relevant, very, very useful, but we have to be constantly checking with the questionnaire. So don't take any online activity for granted. If they're visiting Amazon, if I have an increase in visit to Amazon, I can go and tell the client that everybody has already bought their toys. We have to go to the questionnaire and maybe realize that they are just looking for information. So that's the way we work.
Thanks, Raúl. Ioana, I think this one is probably a question for you, and somebody's asking, could you provide more details regarding participant engagement over such a long period of time?
Yes, absolutely. This is exactly what I was mentioning earlier, that this engagement is something that is built over time, because we are talking about our Spain panel, which is one of the traditional and oldest panels of Netquest. So people are engaged because they are working with us since years. This means that we invite them in surveys, we reward them for all the time that they spend in the survey. So this confidence, this trust is built. So then when you have a special project like this one with a high stake, because it's a long time period and you have to engage many people, then people will respond, because they know that if they respond, they will be rewarded. So what we did here was to prepare very, very good and very clear communication towards the panelists, explaining them exactly what is the project about, how long it will take, what is their participation, how is it going to be done, and of course what is that they are going to get if they participate all along the project. Because at the end of the day, people, well, they want to help market research, but it's all about incentive, and their time is valuable, and of course we have to reward them. So this was very, very clear from the beginning, and this helped us all the time preparing special communications, special reminders, addressing them every week, reminding them that there is a new survey live, that they have to participate, because their opinion is very important and valuable for the client. And I think all this continuous work was exactly what ended up to be a success in this project.
Thanks, Ioana. Did concerns about privacy and data confidentiality come up in part of the process of either recruitment or as the study went on? Did you have any comments you could make on that?
That's a very nice question. So Netquest has been since the beginning, 2006, when we started our panels. We have been always focused, and we really have believed that our main asset is people, is the panelists. So we have always treated the panelists as our main asset. So with respect, with clear communication, and with all the privacy controls. So going back in time, we were the first ones in getting the ISO quality norm for panel management in 2012. And already the ISO norm is quite strict in the sense that you need to be very transparent with the panelists on the information you gather from them. And if they ask you for any kind of information or record you have from them, you have to deliver as well with the client. So since 2012, we have been under the ISO norm. And before the GDPR, I think we had appointed a chief privacy officer some years ago already. I cannot recall exactly the number of years, but he's been working with his team for a long time already. We were GDPR compliant even before the GDPR got in place. So regarding behavioral data, this is a quite sensitive question always. We have this mainframe, the mainframe of privacy, respect with panelists, clear communication of the purpose of this methodology, and total clear relationship that they can really unsubscribe, or they can leave this project whenever they want. So in that respect, we are all compliant in terms of privacy, which is very important, and I thank you for the question.
Yes, this is somewhat related but different. Somebody's wanting to know, were you concerned about bias in your data, because not everyone's willing to be tracked, so that the people who are willing to take part may not look like the general population? Is that something that you've looked at?
Yes, hi, Raúl here. Yeah, that's one of my concerns as well when we started the process. If people, they are aware that they're being tracked and they are biased to their online behavior. But I have to say that once we start receiving the results, we forget about that concern. We really think reading all they do online, their searches, their visit to sites, and everything, we realize that they forget about being tracked.
And, oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so just a sort of methodological point here. When we look at survey responses and we think about bias, we don't know what the population is. So we use confidence intervals and things like this. With the behavioral data, in quite a few cases, you will know what the population data should come to. So you can see how things fit, where you need to make adjustments, and where you're quite happy. So that is one of the benefits in the digital behavior space. Not for everything, but in places.
And this is the case. I mean, we have more than 6,000 people that we are tracking in Spain. So we could set the quotas. And we have the online representativeness of the Spanish population. So we can mirror that to our panel. And we can just select the targets that are accomplishing those quotas. So in that sense, if we can set these quotas, we are completely fine with representativeness.
And here's a slightly different themed question, but I think it's a nice one. It goes back to some of the things we were talking about earlier. And somebody comments that analysing these types of data together can be quite daunting. Can you talk a little bit about the skill set required to make sense of the data? So I suppose what sort of techniques, what sort of attributes, what sort of previous experience is good if you're looking to get into this sort of area?
Yes, well, the analysis was done through our research team, people with experience in quantitative, qualitative study, let's say traditional research. And then we have to look for help in the analytic part or the technology part. As I mentioned, we have to set up a digital platform to do the part of the job for us. What we did to try to understand all the results first is to synthesize the data. If you try to look all the detail from the beginning, you will get lost in thousands of interactions between sites that you can extract any sense of that. And you have to synthesize the information, and so look for general patterns. And then when you find a pattern or a behavior that you want to explain, then you have to open again to the full set of data and try to analyze it like when you're working with open-ended questions or qualitative studies, try to make sense of all this detail, let's say, answers, although they are not really an answer, but the behavior. This is what we did. We work with this type of studies.
That's great, thank you. Another question about how globally scalable this sort of behavioural tracking approach is. What other countries do you think it would be viable in?
Well, any country that you can count with a strong panel, an engaged panel. I can talk about Netquest. Netquest, we could deliver that in Spain, the US, I would say UK, Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Peru. So LATAM and maybe Germany. That would be on Netquest side. And what we are also promoting is that other companies can join us in this game, so as we can broaden the scope and get more global.
Excellent. That probably takes us to a couple of questions that you might want to give the short answer to. Some people are wondering how expensive it is to conduct these sorts of studies. Somebody's wondering what sort of margins are available on these sorts of projects. So,
are they clients, agencies, or providers? So,
do you want me to answer?
Yeah.
I can answer about Netquest margins and this kind of thing. No, but
always low.
Yeah, always very low. Yeah. We can give actual figures, but this is not the most cheap type of research. Imagine the price that you have to pay for a normal survey, and then trying to think about these people being interviewed every 2 weeks with the same questionnaire. So the cost increase there. And the behavioral part of the digital tracking, it always seems expensive when you see the amount of the money, when you see the price. But what I normally do, and maybe it's like a joke, but I always ask the person in front of me, give me your mobile phone, let me look through it. Okay. Are you willing to do that, or how much do I have to pay you to do that? And now imagine that I want your mobile phone and your PC as well, your desktop as well, and not for 1 day, but for 3 months. And then this times 500 families. So they start to realize that it's not so expensive, but the truth is the final price obviously is bigger than a normal survey.
It is, but it's not so unaffordable in the sense that the sort of information that it gives you and what you can do with that is something that is not comparable. And regarding prices, I can tell you it's not that expensive as people could imagine. So I invite everybody that's interested to get in touch with us, and we can provide a concrete proposal. Yeah.
And 2 elements of this process will get cheaper. So the use of the technology will get cheaper, and as the analysis becomes standardized and more familiar, that will become cheaper. Hopefully, the incentives and the treatment of the participants will not become cheaper.
That's the question.
We would
For sure in Netquest, no, because this is something, as Joaquim was explaining earlier, the panelists are our main asset. So we never joke around with this. So regardless of the challenges of the project, I don't know if the incidence, the penetration rate, the project details change from the beginning, we always reward panelists according to the time that they spend. So we don't joke around about this.
Yeah, so I see that the number of questions is going up, not down. So we will attempt to give you slightly shorter answers.
Yeah. Let me just say one thing, and I think it's a discussion for another webinar, which is the pressure on price on normal surveys will make it more difficult for a panel to sustain such an infrastructure. So there is a very valuable infrastructure that we can build, but of course we need to rely on a strong panel. And if the prices on CPI and CPIs of normal surveys go down in a deep way, I'm just shouting out to the industry, be careful, because when you need something really strong and reliable, maybe we'll not be able to provide.
I'm going to ask a few questions now that will probably touch on some different areas. Question about how relevant this type of research would be for, say, a CPG or an FMCG brand, where most of the category behavior happens offline. Have you thought about how you might tackle that?
Well, it depends on the market you are. I mean, digital or e-commerce is very relevant in many, many countries. And today, CPG brand cannot even manage their brand without considering the digital part. So in both, in the purchase side and on the marketing side, so imagine just the sort of searches that people are doing, the sort of brands they are exposed to, and how they behave on retail e-commerce. This is very relevant. So from the marketing side and from the shopper side, I would say that it is very, very relevant.
Okay, now what about people who might be thinking, can I use this approach with a non-panel sample? Can I use it with my client's customer database or an insight community?
If you manage to convince your database to do that, yes, we have the software, we could provide it.
Okay. And have you deployed this solution in any emerging markets, particularly Africa or Asia?
Not as concretely, but there are some Asian companies that have. I'm not aware of Africa, but in Latin, definitely we have.
Okay. Any particular specific experience you'd share from your LATAM work?
Oh, we have plenty. If you, we have been presenting them in different conferences. We have written some papers and use cases. I can recall now, for instance, in Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, we have been working for e-commerces for CPG brands. I am presenting next week. I'm presenting Moscow, a very interesting case by Pernod Ricard and Netquest in Colombia that they really. What they did was to create a holistic strategy online and offline to get the alcohol drinkers. So we have many, many cases that I also invite people to get in touch with us and we can explain more.
Okay, if we think about sort of general tracking studies, somebody's commenting that given the challenge of collecting this data on a one-time basis, how realistic is it that you use this type of data to augment tracking studies that need to be in field all the time?
Well, more or less, this is kind of tracking study was what we did, or even more difficult because it's not a tracking in the sense that every week you have a different sample, a fresh sample. You are asking the same people to answer over and over again and to track their navigation. So in a tracking study, I don't know from a technical perspective, but for me, what could be difficult to see how we can apply that is in a tracking, you have, as I said, fresh sample every week. So then how you're going to track their navigation if there are new respondents every week or month or so.
I will just turn that around and say many clients will see no point in tracking if they can't collect the digital behavior part. So we have to come up with solutions. Now, whether that's one group of people, we're tracking continuously with digital, and then we marry that together with computational techniques with a different sample, needs to be looked into. But it's not going to be possible just to do old-fashioned survey-based tracking. that we were talking before over lunch, and I described that really as a zombie technique. It's dead, but it's still walking around.
And here's probably a clarification question on some of the operational aspects. Somebody's wondering how you send the survey to the participants. Is it emailed or part of the installed software?
No, actually, all these participants are people in our panel, so they belong to our online community. And we program the survey, so the survey comes as a Word questionnaire, then we transform this into a link, and we invite them based on the profile. So they get an email, an invitation email with the link, and they click on the link in order to access the survey.
That's great. Somebody's also seeking some clarification on whether it's possible to collect information on the exposure to online advertising. They're particularly interested in being able to understand if there's a difference in claimed exposure and actual exposure.
So what we record is the URL. So as long as the URL is seen, we can recall it. We can do that.
Yeah, I suppose that if you tag your advertising like we do in other surveys, and you mix those two things together, if your advertising in online advertising is tagged, you will have this information as well.
Yeah.
So so you put a tag in to that.
I suppose in this case we didn't tag the campaigns, but I assume that you can do that in the same.
We can do that as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think a follow-up question that's just come through that says, "Can you track exposure to ads via cookies?"
Yeah, but this is another beast. So this is another beast. We can
another webinar.
Yeah, another webinar. Yeah.
Okay, stay tuned. And what is possibly the last question? So we're managing to, I think, cover off most people's queries. If you've been sitting there in the audience and have not yet typed your question in, please type it in now, either to the question box in the Zoom platform or on Twitter with #NewmR, or you'll miss your chance. And possibly the last question, did you do cross-device comparisons? Were the paths to purchase different depending on device? Yes,
we analyzed that because at the beginning of the process, we assume that parents will use their mobile phones as a tool for searching for information on their purchase. And I don't remember the exact figures, but we look at the overlap of both systems and how many of them use only a smartphone or only PCs, and then at the behavior of these three groups, only PC, only smartphone, and both. Yes, we look at that. Yeah.
Okay, we have managed to answer all of that long list of questions, so that's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
So thanks to you, the audience, for signing up and coming along and listening today. And thanks to everyone from Netquest and to Raúl and Ray for taking part in the live discussion in Barcelona. And this is the first time we've broadcast a webinar from Barcelona. So that's been fun as well. So thank you, everyone.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.